And now, Rhonda, will you do the honor of introducing our first speakers?
Yes, I will. Thank you. We have Carla Kazir as a gerontology clinical nurse specialist at Sanford Medical Center with over 25 years of experience helping older adults stay safe and independent. She leads the Stand Strong Fall Prevention Initiative and works across communities to reduce falls, including for people living with Parkinson's. She will be joined with Amy Koenigs. She is a dedicated occupational therapist with 11 years of experience specializing in fall prevention for the past 3 years. As the master trainer for the Stay Active and Independent for Life SAIL program and the OT for the Stand Strong Empowered Fall Prevention program, Amy is committed to promoting safety, mobility, and independence for older adults. So welcome, Carla and Amy.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, my name is Carla Kazir, and yes, my mother-in-law always told us it rhymes with brazier. It is the only thing it rhymes with. So when she said that, that's exactly right. No. And this is Amy, and we are so glad that you invited us here today. We are not experts in Parkinson's disease, but have worked tirelessly the last 3 to 7 years for us working with fall prevention. And so some of the things today will apply to everybody in the room because we're all aging, and falls are an important part of life for all of us. And so we're excited to be here, and we have done some more research into what we can do specifically for those living with Parkinson's. So our first, we'll just kind of look at our objectives, and first we want to know the main reasons that people with Parkinson's are more likely to fall. So we're going to spend a little time on that. And then some simple safety tips, daily actions that can help prevent falls.
And we'll understand the basic movement strategies, exercises, and equipment that can improve safe mobility. Learn easy, safe steps for getting up after a fall, and find helpful resources and programs that support fall prevention.
All right, so we'll get going. First off, it looks like, oh great, are you going to talk all about data? Well, not really. But we do want to share with you that all of us in the room that are aging are at risk for falls, regardless of our health conditions, because aging is one of the top risks for falls, and we're all aging. Otherwise, what else would happen? So older adults in the United States are increasingly dying from unintentional falls, with a significant rise in death rates over the past 2 decades. Anybody wonder why that might be? We're living longer with chronic illnesses today, aren't we? And we are living longer and stronger, but eventually we do sometimes have some falls and some other weaknesses and issues. So we're really working towards what we can do to decrease this trend. In fact, in our state, South Dakota, when we started our work with Sanford on fall prevention, we were 3rd in the nation for deaths from falls in South Dakota, which we were not very excited about. You don't want to be number 1, although Wisconsin is. So, and for you from Minnesota, I feel really bad, but you're number 2 right now. But we're excited in South Dakota to now be out of the top 10 because we have started with other partners in our surrounding areas. We've started a South Dakota Fall Prevention Coalition. We've gotten a lot more work done in that group across all different entities, home cares, assisted livings, independent living, our hospital systems. We've started some evidence-based programs that can help, so classes that are based out in our communities So if you get physical and occupational therapies, you can also then continue on in a social group of people who can do some exercises and classes and things to help maintain and improve your independence. And we've just done a lot of awareness and things like that in the past few years. So we've really made a big dent in this. And then I always have those people who say, well, aren't people falling in the Midwest because of ice? I think the deaths from falls are all because of ice. Don't you think Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota? But North Dakota's a little better than us. They're even farther north. And typically it's about 6% of those unintentional deaths from falls are on ice. 6%, that's not very many. The majority happen in our homes, less than 3 feet from the ground, doing our normal daily tasks. So in the bathroom, in the kitchen, those sorts of things. So that's what we want to help you work on. Not those big things like, oh, I shouldn't go out because I might fall, and so I'm going to take my walker and my cane, but maybe using that walker and cane in the house, doing your normal activities. So we're going to talk a little more about that, but that's my little soapbox right there. And you can see some of the other statistics, but 1 in 4 adults over 65 fall each year, and then as we age, it's more like 1 in 3. So now we want to look at why is this a little bit more in Parkinson's? Some of you could tell me all of it. You'd say, well, hey, I've lived this, I know. But not everybody is as aware about Parkinson's in the room as some of you. So it just depends. You're all at different stages. So we want to talk a little bit about, for those dealing specifically with Parkinson's, it is the major source of injury, loss of independence, and reduced quality of life. And rather than having 20 to 30% of people fall annually who are older adults, those who are living with Parkinson's, it's an estimated 50 to 70% of people fall each year. So it is a significantly higher number. But what we want to do is prevent those injuries, okay? The other thing that is, it's common for all falls to be multifactorial, or have, meaning they're not just one reason that we fall. We didn't have our cane with us, or we didn't have a grab bar in the right spot. Usually they have several reasons that we're having more falls, and that's true for everyone, but I think we can really hone in and find some areas to work on for those living with Parkinson's. So that's what we're going to work towards, having multi-component interventions because it's happening for multiple reasons. And again, falls do happen more as our disease duration and severity do increase. So for all of you, caregivers included, this STEADY tool is something that we use all over the country. It is an evidence-based tool that we use in doctors' offices or providers' offices and in our screening clinics. And it's the 3 key questions, the 3 key things that make you at risk for falls are, do you feel unsteady when standing or walking? That could be quite a few of us, right? Do you worry about falling or have a fear of falling? Interestingly, that is one of the top reasons people fall. They have a fear of falling, and so then what happens is, I'm afraid, so I don't do as much. I don't get up as often. Maybe I'm really nervous about it, so I'm going to be so careful that I don't remember to try to take big steps. I don't do the things that I've learned because I'm really afraid, and that becomes a vicious cycle of I don't do as much because I'm afraid I might fall. Now I sit more and I don't exercise. Now I have a fall. Now I go downhill more. And so we want to stop that cycle, right? We need to do some things to get over that fear of falling. And one of our classes is called A Matter of Balance, and we'll tell you about it near the end. That one is specifically designed to talk about our fear of falling and how we can help overcome that, how we can talk together and work together on how we can increase our confidence and what physical things we can do to build that confidence. So that's a great class if fear of falling is something that's happened for you. And then, of course, if you've fallen in the past year, you're going to be more at risk for falling again. And so then it kind of trails out into there's another longer screening that gets into all the little details. You know, do you push up from the chair? Do you use a walker cane? Are you supposed to use a walker cane? And you decide to leave it by the front door. So when you get up at night, it's by the front door, but you're in your bedroom. So some of those things that we start to work on and talk about. The next one, these are then from that screening, these are what they have been fully studied and researched of the primary fall risk factors. And this isn't just for people with Parkinson's, so this is for all of you. So look at your spouse or your caregiver or your friend and say, ha, it's for you too. Because we all have of these issues, these risk factors. We can have reduced muscle strength can cause us issues. Gait or balance problems, or medication side effects, home hazards, which Amy's going to talk a little bit more, and then your next speaker, Lisi, is going to get all into home modifications and home hazards. Vision and hearing concerns, feet or footwear issues, and then and I'll talk about those more specifically in our next little part here, but I do want to touch on vitamin D deficiency more. Because when I first started in 2019 with fall prevention, we talked about, oh yeah, and then vitamin D and calcium are good because they're good for your bones and good for osteoporosis. So, and it always seemed like, well, that isn't a fall prevention, like a risk factor. Isn't that more something for osteoporosis and we should just do that if you're at risk? But I had not studied up on vitamin D very much, and in my mind, it was all for bone health. But just want to point out that you do want to talk to your providers about your vitamin D. Men and women, not just women, because osteoporosis is often more common in women, because it is for bone health, but also helps with muscle movement and the nerve connections to the brain. Well, how important is that when we have Parkinson's, correct? And our immune system function. So important, they were studying during COVID how people with better, their optimal levels of vitamin D were doing better. It also can help with major diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disease, respiratory, diabetes, and dementia. So knowing your vitamin D level is a great question for your provider. And not everyone needs a supplement, but we do live in the dark Midwest. It's a little dark today, right? And rainy, and sometimes we don't get out and get that sun where you can get vitamin D. So a supplement might be important for you. So that was my other soapbox. I've got a few, don't I? All right, yeah. Don't get me going. Okay. So next, those were all things that were general to everybody that's aging. But as we look at people living with Parkinson's, you know a lot of these symptoms. So we're just going to look at them a little closer, and then we'll talk about some ways to combat those. So if you're not as familiar with Parkinson's, you may or may not know, you've probably heard those words, bradykinesia and rigidity or stiffness. Those are things that happen with Parkinson's when you have a lack of dopamine in the brain. And so you end up with that slower, shorter step and that shuffling that can really affect your balance. So if we're not picking up our feet the way we always did, it's so easy to trip on something when you have a transition in the room, or when there's a sidewalk that has just a little change, or even not when there's nothing in the way, but we trip on our own shoes because we're not picking up our feet enough, right? So that in and of itself makes us at more risk for falls. In addition, that movement and reflex issue. So as people with their Parkinson's end up losing some of your postural reflexes. So a lot of times people get a little more stooped. Now your center of gravity is off. So it's harder to quickly adjust your balance because your center of gravity is no longer upright, but it's just a little bit forward, correct? You'll see that frequently. So smaller steps, that stooped balance, and then if you get knocked backwards, they call it retropulsion. Sometimes it's hard to do any catching because you don't have the reflexes that you used to have. So you'll see that in a lot of people, and so Amy will talk a little bit more about some different walkers and things like that and exercises that can help with some of those things. But that's the natural tendency when you do live with Parkinson's. Another one that we talk about frequently is freezing. And a lot of you know what freezing is. Not everyone has freezing, especially oftentimes people with more of the gait changes in their Parkinson's will possibly have more freezing than maybe people with more of a tremor type Parkinson's symptoms. But regardless about the freezing can often cause issues when you get stressed, when you need to rush. So planning ahead, all those kinds of things that I'm terrible at. But stress, doorways, maybe having your medications on. If you guys probably know a little bit more about medications, but having your medication doses and where you're really doing your activities of daily living when they're on, than when it's off, when maybe it's time for another dose. So we'll talk a little more about that, but people who have freezing are at a much higher risk than others, even with Parkinson's. And then orthostatic hypotension. Some of you are aware of that, but when your blood pressure drops when you stand up. I just had a coworker, her husband, he's just getting a little bit older, and he popped up and he said, "Oh my gosh, I saw stars," and then things went black, and luckily I had a chair to sit back down on. And it can happen to any of us. Happens a little bit more when we have certain medications. And then with Parkinson's, there's some autonomic nervous changes that cause some issues with norepinephrine. So basically, the blood isn't getting up to your head fast enough. So super important for getting up slowly, adjusting your position slower, maybe pumping your ankles and squeezing your hands and before you get up so that you start to get that blood moving up and out. And we'll talk a little more about some of those things, but also making sure your medications are adjusted appropriately so that you don't have those issues. There are medicines that cause that. Besides Parkinson's, there's blood pressure medicines and sleeping pills and things like that that can cause issues. But one of the biggest things with that is to make sure that you are not dehydrated. So does everybody have water at their table? I see a lot of coffee. You're just like me. Making sure you're hydrated. As we age, I'm a geriatric nurse by trade, and as we age, a natural tendency is to not drink our fluids like we used to. We're just not as thirsty. And so encourage you to make sure you're always drinking your water and replacing that water, because dehydration can cause a lot of issues for many things, but especially for a drop in blood pressure. And we talked a little bit about some of those medications. Make sure, and the timing of your medications can be an issue. Make sure that your pharmacist is one of your good teammates and friends, because the pharmacist has invaluable information. Sometimes we have a tendency to be like, oh yeah, you pick up your meds, they're the same, and they say, would you like me to talk to you a little bit about those? Do you need any explanation? And we go, nope, been on them before. But they've got all sorts of information. They've been to school for a jillion years, and they've got some great experiences, so utilize them. They are a service that is fabulous. And so really, I encourage you to talk with your pharmacist. Muscle weakness, we've talked a little bit about that cycle. And the more we sit, the more that we don't do, we have more problems with our core strength. And then when we have a little bit of a stooped posture, sometimes we're not working on that core strength to be able to adjust when we need to get up, and we need to be able to adjust to changes in the terrain or things like that. So Amy's going to talk more about that. Focus. Did anybody else have trouble with multitasking, or is it just me? Yeah? Okay, yeah. Some people agree. Multitasking sounds like a great thing, but it's really not that wonderful. Focusing on what we're doing when we're doing it is an important item because especially with all the autonomic changes in the brain when you're living with Parkinson's, multitasking becomes harder than it even is for the rest of us. So I can't quite imagine that. So walking while distracted can lead to falls. Trying to talk, and I think of that when I'm talking to someone and they're trying to do something. Sometimes that's not so great. We're irritating them because they're focused. We need to stay focused. And so sometimes, it's on me as the caregiver or care provider to remember that I need to help them focus on what they're doing. Because it isn't that, gosh, they can't multitask anymore. It's that, no, my brain can do one of those things at a time, and I can do them all well, but not at the same time. I need to get those spread out. And then vision and perception issues are so important. And what I like to look at, and I have this handout at our booth for Sanford, but it talks about cognitive, sensory, and motor issues in balance. And so our brain is processing what it takes in, right? And then it's telling our joints and our muscles and our bones and everything, to move in a certain way. So we've already talked about that we have weakness, we've got astute posture, maybe we're not getting those triggers from our brain quite as quickly. Now, sensory issues, we're trying to get all of the things in from our surroundings, and what happens if we have glasses that don't have the right prescription, or if we have glaucoma, or we have macular degeneration. Or, I didn't even really realize this in studying up for this a little bit, I didn't know that sometimes Parkinson's can actually cause blurry vision and double vision, and some difficulty with depth perception and judging distances and spatial awareness. So that was new to me in reading up on it. But knowing that, we really need to make sure that we're looking at the lights are on or off when we're doing something. We need that good lighting. We need to be sure we're getting our appointments at our eye doctor so that we have the best vision that we can have. And then it also goes along with hearing, because our hearing loss, if you have 25 decibel hearing loss or more, which isn't really that much, you are at 3 times higher risk for falls. People don't think about if they don't wear their hearing aid, they're at a risk for fall, but they are. Or if you don't get the hearing aid that maybe you could use, you're at risk for falls. The other thing that hearing does is it helps us bring in all that sensory information. So you'll see that people with cognitive impairment or memory loss, you will see that more often when people have hearing loss, because you can't remember something you've not taken in, right? If I never heard it, I can't remember it. I'm missing all those cues around me. And so that's so important that we are looking at those perception and sensory things. The last one for sensory or perception is neuropathy. And so a lot of people have issues with not having good feeling in their feet or in their fingertips, and that can cause a lot of issues of spatial awareness and tripping and not feeling where things are in the ground. So that's another one to watch for sometimes if you have Parkinson's and diabetes, because that's a really big one in diabetes. So working with those things and your providers and your therapists to make sure you're trying to get the best sensory input you can get so that it can help your brain to tell your body what to do. And this one we're not going to talk, we've talked about already. This is just when I said, what makes a person at high risk. The studies show people with Parkinson's, falls in the previous year, if you have freezing of gait in the past month, or a slow gait speed, those are things that can cause issues. So What are we doing about them? Well, I've started already because I just can't not tell the whole thing all at once. I'm supposed to be saying, here's the risk factors, here's what to do. But as you could tell, when you get to one thing, it's like, oh, I might as well just talk about it. But we'll hit on a few more, but here are just kind of the top things that we really encourage people to do for your safety and daily actions to prevent falls. And the first one I think you've probably heard, if you do live with Parkinson's, you've probably heard, oh, keep a diary of your medications and when you're on and when you're off and all that, and people go, get tired of that. If you're on a diet, you hear that too. Track all your food, know what your macros are. Oh. But if you do have falls, keeping a diary of those falls can be so, so helpful. The when did you fall? What time of day? What day was it? What were you doing at that time? Where? Was it in the kitchen? Were you getting things out of the refrigerator and you had to turn and put it on the table? And it's the second time it happened. Well, is it in the turn that's causing the problem? Or is it in the carrying something? And then why? Why did you think you fell? Was it you actually blacked out, so you had that blood pressure drop? Or was it someone was talking to you and you were distracted? I was in Vegas recently, and I'm running down the steps to do something, and I'm hanging onto the rail. We were kind of in a carport thing, and somebody said, oh, look at that balloon. There's a balloon. So I look up at the balloon, and kaboom, I missed the bottom step. Now, I was hanging onto the rail, so I didn't get too injured, but I fell because I was not paying attention to what I was doing. So now my thought process is, in the future, well, one is focus on what you're doing, and two is, gosh, I'm so glad I was holding onto the rail. I really would have gotten hurt. I'd have had a whole scraped up face. And that wouldn't have been fun, and I bet I'd have needed stitches. So I was hanging on the rail. That was good. So if I'm keeping a little diary of that, think of all the things you learned from that. And you can show it to your team of your provider, your therapists, your caregivers, and be like, okay, maybe we need to make an adjustment. Maybe I shouldn't take my shower at that time of the day because I've fallen in the shower 3 times. Or maybe I need a grab bar in this room because this is not a room I can function in as well as I could. So those fall diaries are so much more valuable than you think. But you have to use them that way. Just writing it down and not learning from it is really a task in mundane things. But if you look at it, look back over the month or two and say, oh, I bet if I practiced this skill, or if I did this one change, I think that could help. So, and a lot of times your providers are very helpful with that. The next one is engaging in regular strength and balance exercises. A lot of people, my mom tells me, she goes, well, we didn't exercise growing up. Like, we worked. We did housework, we worked at work, and we did fine. But today's world is a little bit different, and when we do live with Parkinson's and we start to sit more, intentional exercise and planning and on a schedule is really, really important. So Amy will talk about that. And then even doing, like my mom said, practicing safe functional tasks frequently. So what do we have to do in our life? Was there one thing that we have to do in life all the time that we could maybe practice in order to live? You're like, what? Chair stands. Getting up from the chair. It's actually one of the most important exercises my therapists tell me, because how often do we get up from a chair in a day? You get up from your bed, you have to stand up. You get up from the toilet, got to have a chair stand, right? Got to be able to stand up. Getting up from the meal table, getting to wherever we're going. And we each stand up and down dozens of times every day. And so that's an exercise that we can do that's going to keep us more functional. So Amy's going to talk a little more about that. And then we've already talked about vision exams being important. Wear your hearing aids if you need them. That's like one of my big take-homes. And then foot care and appropriate shoes. We don't often think about that, but if you are not wearing shoes in your house right now, because maybe you don't want to ruin the carpets or whatever, get a pair of shoes that fit you well that you just leave in the house, and those are your house shoes. Slippers, you know, they have to fit well. They can't be floppy. They can't be slippery on the bottom. They can't be, I mean, they maybe you can find shoes that you can slip into fairly easy to wear in the house, but they have to stay on. And they, like I said, they need to fit well. And really, best case scenario, they have an arch in them and they fit you well enough that they're comfortable and they support you. Because when we're in the house with flip-flops or sandals or slippers or stocking feet, we have so many falls that could be prevented. So if you're trying to protect your carpets, my husband owns a carpet store. Yes, don't wear those shoes, you're getting all that in, dragging it in the house. Have a pair of shoes that you only wear in the house, and it can solve all kinds of problems. And if you need a podiatrist or something like that, if your feet, you have problems with your feet, by all means, there are many in town or in this area that would be wonderful for that. And we talked about vitamin D already. So these things are, we already kind of talked about medications review. Make sure you're working with your pharmacist on that. I'm going to pass it over to Amy to talk about home assessment modifications and a lot of the other things.
So yeah, home modifications, the next presentation will go into a little bit more, so I'll just touch on it briefly, but very important, so always consider having a home safety assessment, someone coming out to your house to go through the different rooms, the doorways, etc., and make a list of things that can be changed. And then medications and adjustments, again, talk with your provider, talk with your pharmacist if you have anything. Again, things change. Maybe you're on a new med for a little bit, that can interact with your other meds, so always talking with your provider and your pharmacist. So common environmental contributors of falls, always something around. So trip hazards, do you have loose rugs? Do you have pets and their toys are on the floor, or small dogs that are running in between your legs? Kids or grandkids, they have toys laying around. All those things that you can trip over. We don't want you looking down at your feet when you're walking, so we want to have those things picked up. Poor lighting, we kind of talked about vision. As we age, you need more light. So turning lights on, having motion lights if you're getting up in the night, so things are lighting up, night lights, etc. Again, as we age, our vision decreases, so we need more light, more illumination. In the bathrooms, again, are there loose rugs? My little trick is if you step on it and wiggle your foot, you don't want the rug to move. If it's moving under your foot, toss it out. Get something that's non-skid or put something underneath it so it doesn't slide around. Grab bars, shower chairs, all the good OT equipment that you need to be safe. Footwear we talked on again, flip-flops, I don't like them. Straps, we want them to stay on. We don't want them loose, flip-flopping around. And then stairs, a lot of us have stairs to get in the house, going up and down stairs in the home, having good railings by all the stairs, something to hang on to, or at least kind of like a grab bar or pull bar if you only have one or two steps that you can grab onto to get in. So what do you do when you have those things? So again, removing those rugs, removing that clutter, pick it up, put it in a basket on the side, increase your lighting. Grab bars, non-slip rugs, again, other equipment that you may need. If you need a shower chair so you can sit to shower instead of standing the whole time, adding those grab bars. Supportive shoes, and then again, railings. And if you need, consider a ramp to get up those stairs. If you're unable to modify, adding a ramp or moving to another home, looking into considerations to get a ramp to make that easier to get into your house. So assistive devices, I see a lot around here. We need them to be appropriate. So what works for one person might not work for you, might not work for another. So always talking with your provider and your therapist to make sure you have the appropriate device for your level of Parkinson's. Everyone's at a different stage. And then they need to be fit properly. So if you get a used one from a friend or a neighbor, you need to make sure it's fit properly. So again, talking with your therapist to make sure the height of it's right, the width, depending on if it's a cane or a walker or a wheelchair. It needs to be fit properly, because if it's not fit properly, it can cause a risk for falls, and it might be doing more damage than helping you. And then trained on the device. So again, if you're moving from a cane to a walker, it's going to be different, so you need to be trained on it. So talk with your provider and therapist, and they'll make sure you know how to use it properly. A cane is obviously a lot different. You have 1 point versus 4 points with a walker, or a front-wheeled walker versus a four-wheeled walker. It's going to move a little bit different with the 4 wheels versus the 2. So anytime you switch from one device to another, reach out to your therapist. They'll work on it with you, make sure that's the right device. But again, it improves your safety within the home and outdoors. So again, if you're walking on grass or uneven surfaces, again, just making sure you're using the right device. So here's just a couple pictures of a cane, front-wheeled walker, and then the fancy walker. But again, talk with your provider, your therapist, make sure you're using the right one. A lot of times, as you progress, you might need the one on the far right has like a metronome. It has a beam, so you can make sure you're crossing that. They want you to take big steps, again, as you progress, if you need something a little more bells and whistles. But again, a lot of times a cane works just fine. Maybe you don't need any assistive device at this time. But talk with your therapist, and they'll make sure you have something. And again, sometimes maybe you just need a little bit when you're out on uneven surfaces, if you're on grass or gravel or uneven pavement.
And what is the significance of the metronome or the beam?
So with the laser light, it making sure you're taking big steps. They want you to break that light. So when you step through it, the light breaks. So that's, again, helping with those big steps. Because again, the shuffling that you notice with Parkinson's. So if you break the light and then the metronome, it just keeps you on a pace to help with that freezing. So some different exercises that everyone can do: balance challenging, progressive resistance, and functional training. So balance challenging, that multitasking is hard, but it is really good for us to do. So working on it, and then doing multi-directional, big movements, turning. Again, that turning can be a big risk for falling. That's difficult for a lot of us. But doing that multi-directional stuff, that's really going to challenge your balance, and then start small and always work your way up. So start with an easy task, make it a little bit harder. That's going to improve your balance over the long run. And then progressive resistance training, so using weights, again, starting low and building up as you feel comfortable. We want to strengthen those muscles. We don't want them to get weak, because again, muscle weakness can lead to falling, just like Carla talked about, kind of that vicious cycle. So if we kind of break that, start some strength training, building up those muscles. You don't necessarily need to go out and buy weights. You can use water bottles, cans of soup, items around the house. You don't have to go out and buy a bunch of fancy equipment, just easy things that you can use just to do some light strengthening. Functional training. So every day we get up, we're going to get dressed. You might have to reach in the closet, bend down to the dresser, etc. So doing functional training, doing those movements are going to make your daily tasks a lot easier. So again, lifting and reaching. So maybe you're reaching for a coffee cup and you're bringing it down. So doing those movements with your arms, bending over, doing some small squats. Just incorporate all that, just to make your daily activities a lot easier. So getting dressed, taking a shower, getting around in the kitchen, all that kind of stuff, going grocery shopping. We move a lot during those, so doing those as functional training, it just makes it a lot easier. But have fun, be creative. Again, you don't have to go out and buy fancy equipment and just sit there and lift weights or do anything, but make it fun. Some people don't like exercising, so if you make it fun, then maybe you'll do it more often. And all of this is going to just help reduce your falls, improve your confidence, and improve your function. Again, want to break that freezing, walking a little bit better, maintaining that balance, your strength. Again, just living a quality life and reducing those falls. So how to fall, or if you fall, how to get back up safely. So I'm going to do a little demonstration. It might be a little difficult for some of you to see. If you want another demonstration later, you can come find me and I can do it a little closer up. But So I'll demonstrate how to kind of get up safely. If you've taken our Matter of Balance class, I'm sure you've seen this, but it's always a good refresher. And then a lot of times with those movements, freezing can happen. So tips, you can count out loud. So again, doing your own kind of metronome, 1, 2, 3. You can say it in your head, 1, 2, 3, go, talking to yourself. That's just going to produce that steady rhythmic pattern to help you kind of break that freezing. And then other cues. So, all right, rock forward, lift your leg. Again, you can say them out loud, then you can say them in your head. Just things to get you moving, to get you up. And then other tips, practice this when you're feeling well, when your meds are on, because you don't want to fall, and that's the first time you're practicing it. Again, you don't necessarily have to get on the floor to practice it, but just kind of familiarize yourself with the steps needed to get up. So again, if you do fall, you kind of know those steps of how to get up safely. Okay? All right. Where would be best? Can most of you see if I come up here for you guys? Is that all right? Okay. So this is my sturdy chair. I'll try not to make too much noise with this. Okay. So say you've fallen.
She's like a commercial. But she can get up.
So first step is just going to be to roll onto your side. But every step you're going to make sure you're not injured, you haven't hit your head, you're not dizzy. If you're seriously injured, obviously you're going to call for help first. But if you feel okay to get up, roll onto your side, look around the room where you've fallen. My chair's over there. Next step, just kind of push up onto your hip a little bit. Again, you can kind of scan the room, scan the area where you're at. My chair's behind me, so the next step is either going to be to crawl or scoot. A lot of people, if you've had knee replacements, crawling on your knees hurts. You are not going to hurt your knee. They are cemented in there, but it might be painful. But you're not going to mess anything up. So a lot of people do like to scoot. So if you want to scoot on your butt, and then you can just slide, scoot over, okay? If you have a lot of arm strength, you can get up from here, but a lot of times it's going to be easier if you kind of flip over onto all fours, okay? Then you have more points of surface. One hand up on your sturdy surface, and then if you have a strong leg, I want you to put that foot flat on the floor. So whatever leg you feel is stronger, that one's going to be your base. And then you can do whatever you need with this hand. You can push up, and you're going to turn and sit down, okay? So at every step, you're going to make sure you're not dizzy, you're not lightheaded. Again, if you're seriously injured, call for help before you get up. But make sure if you're dizzy at any of those places, stop, rest for a little bit. Depending on where you fell, if you fell over by Carla and you need to scoot or crawl over here, you're going to be very tired. So this process might take you a half hour if you're a ways from a chair. Sit and rest at each point. It's going to be very tiring, but want to have a sturdy surface. So a lot of times, placing chairs strategically throughout the house. Again, if you're getting tired while you're walking, you have a place to sit, but just having a sturdy place. So obviously don't want to use anything on wheels because that's going to slide away from you as you're trying to get up. But you can use a coffee table if it's sturdy, a couch, chairs, again, anything like that. Some other situations that you may get into, some people go if they crawl to a staircase and then they can kind of bump themselves up if they aren't able to stand up from the ground to the chair. So then they can kind of use the steps. Some people can pull their couch cushion down. Again, it gets them one level higher before they get up to the couch. So just thinking of the things within your house, within your environment that you may use would be good. Again, thinking about these steps before you actually have a fall. A lot of people are like, well, what if I fall out in the yard or I don't have anything to get up on? Again, look around. If you have a deck, try to scoot to that. A sturdy tree, it's going to be a lot more difficult, but you can scoot or crawl to those things and then use the tree or the deck to help get up that way. But it is a lot more difficult, obviously, if there's nothing else around. What other suggestions?
If somebody else, say that your loved one falls and they're outside, One thing you could do is help coach them like Amy just did and bringing them a chair. So my dad fell out in the yard and Mom brought out, he was out there without his walker. So brought him his wheeled walker that has the little seat, and he is able to crawl up by her helping coach him. But don't try to lift them yourself, because then you as the caregiver or the friend who comes upon a person will now probably be on the floor as well or injured. And we don't want anybody to come and just scoop you up, because then oftentimes your tendency is to kind of just be dead weight. So it's better to call for help then. So these are great tactics.
Yeah. Having a gait belt in the house, so if you're a caregiver or a family member, they can put that on you. That is helpful to give you.
So a little something to hang on to and just guide, but don't lift.
So talk with the therapist, talk with your provider. Those are easy to get. Okay. So some specific therapy and exercises. Both Sanford and Avera have the Big and Loud program, so I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that or participated in that, but a good program. Again, want you big steps and then talking loud. Speak out and power moves. Those are some other exercises. Avera's getting some of those. Again, the websites are there. Rock Steady Boxing we have in the community here, so that's another good one. I know a lot of people enjoy that. And then MDT Education Solutions, so that is a new thing. Active Gen is starting a specific Parkinson's pathway strength training. They're looking into doing more aerobic balance and flexibility in the future, but right now the program is focused on strength training. They have them at both campuses, so there's a little flyer on that, and we have additional flyers at our table when you come for that break. And then some other evidence-based fall prevention classes that we offer are bingo size. So just kind of like it sounds, you play bingo and you do some exercise. Super fun. Coming out to the community and we do that. That's a 10-week course. Again, flyers of all of this and handouts we have at our table for more information. A Matter of Balance really focuses on the fear of falling, kind of some cognitive restructuring, and then some exercises built into that as well. And then Stay Active and Independent for Life, or SAIL. That's offered around the community in several locations. That is a true exercise program. It is an hour for twice a week for 12 weeks, but a lot of people love that too. So if you're unsure, you can come visit us. We usually say start with a little bit of a lower program and then get up to the more intensive exercise program to make sure you feel comfortable. Enhanced Fitness, Stepping On, and Tai Chi are other ones that are offered around the community as well. And then here are some resources. If you go to the Sanford website and type in balance in the search bar, our classes will come up. You can register. You can always call us as well. And then the South Dakota Fall Prevention Coalition that we created a couple years ago. We meet and talk about all this stuff. And then our contacts if you do have any questions in the future. Yeah. Any questions right now that anyone has? Okay. Oh, there's one. Oh. Bruce.
Two-story house. 3 days later, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. There was a program that you came out and assessed our house. Is there still that program available?
Yes, so we switched it. It's now called Empower. It was called Capable, so if any of you have heard of Capable, that grant has ended, but we do have a new grant, and it's called Empower. You can visit us at our table as our time is almost up, and we can tell you more about that, but yes, we do have home assessments.
Well, let me say, I didn't need you guys when you came out to assess my house. Remember, they're trained professionals. They do this for a living. Listen to them. Because the suggestions they made in the last 4 years have been invaluable. They've been wonderful. So thank you for 4 years ago, and thank you for the ensuing time. think that's it.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, come visit us at our booth later today, and we can provide you some of that information. And then, yeah, Empowered, I guess we didn't actually put on our slides. We are just transitioning to Empowered, and so those home visits will be available.
I was wondering if there's fees for all the different classes or programs that are available.
There's what?
Most of them
Fees.
have fees, is that correct?
Yeah, so a lot of them are free, and some of them do charge, but we have a list if you want to visit us, so we can keep moving today.
Yeah,
Yep.
most of ours, all
Most of
of
them
the
are
ones
free.
that are grant funded are free. So there will be, yeah, and I believe, though when I talked to an ActiveGen could enter at their booth could tell you more about the Parkinson's ones, but I believe they're taking anyone in those as well. I don't believe you have to be a member for that. So, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.